Hey guys, I've been out doing a little fishing yesterday and today. Haven't caught a thing, but it's still nice to be out on the water. A little rainy, but I hope the sun will come out. I get comments and questions just about every week. I actually got one today asking if the Trimaran that I owned in Hawaii was still for sale, or if I even owned it still. The answer is yes, I sold that Trimaran in Hawaii, and I figured it was about time I did a video on it and to talk about some of the lessons I learned from owning that boat and trying to do a refit in Hawaii. I actually sold it a little over a year ago. A lot of the lessons I've learned from the Trimaran I've been able to apply to Moxie, my Hunter 54, which I own now and I'm conducting the refit on. My experience with Moxie has been far better than my situation with the Trimaran. So I'll run down some of the lessons I've learned here. The first big lesson I learned was to have control of the situation. I had flown to Hawaii to buy the boat. I wanted to see it in person first, but I was working overseas, so after I purchased the boat, I went back to work and I needed someone to help me lead the refit. The person who helped me lead the refit was actually the broker who sold it to me. Probably a bad decision from the start. So I was back at work thousands and thousands of miles away from the boat in Hawaii, and I felt I had zero control over the situation. I was able to communicate by phone and email, of course, with the broker who was helping me lead the refit, but I just had absolutely no control. At any given moment, I didn't have total control over what work was being done on the boat, what was completed or not, and what the costs were going to be. Compare that to my current refit. When I bought Moxie, I was also still working overseas and I owned the Trimaran at the time. My purchase and the start of the refit for Moxie, my Hunter 54, has been a much better experience. I've just felt like I've had a lot more control over the situation. That's based on a couple factors: location, the people involved, lots of stuff. I made sure with the Hunter 54 that I was very deliberate about everything I did, the repairs, the costs, everything. And I really just took much more control over the entire situation. Lesson number 2 that I have is to work with people that you trust. The broker, again, leading the refit in Hawaii for me with the Tri, absolutely did not trust him. And the contractors that he subcontracted with to work on the boat for me didn't know who they were. I just didn't feel I had any trust in the entire situation. Compare that to the refit with Moxie, and I definitely had people who I trusted involved. First of all, I bought the boat and immediately had it shipped to a boatyard very close to my parents, so my father was able to supervise the work, and of course I trust my father. He was definitely able to keep an eye on everything in my absence. But I worked very closely with the boatyard staff and contractors from outside the boatyard, and I communicated with them very regularly by phone and email, and was able to control what work was being done on the boat, which repairs needed to be completed right away, all the costs involved. I had full trust in everyone involved, and it made me feel a whole lot better about the refit. Lesson number 3 that I learned is to buy a boat near you. I bought the Trimaran in Hawaii, but I meant to get it to Florida. A lot of people will try to buy a boat in a different location, maybe Asia or even Europe, because they think it's undervalued and they can buy it a little cheaper. But I can tell you the costs involved in getting it ready for transport and to move it may not be worth it. So I'm in Florida and there's tons of boats in Florida. We're surrounded by water. I really should have just made the decision to pay a little bit more and get the right boat here in Florida. If you're on the East Coast, I don't necessarily advise buying a boat on the West Coast and having it transported or sailed through the Panama Canal. Just really focus in the local area, maybe within a few hundred miles or somewhere where you can easily have the boat transported. When I owned that Trimaran, all I could think of every single day was, man, I wish the Trimaran were already in Florida. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get it refit and ready to make the trip, but that just never happened. Finally, I just gave up and bought Moxie, the Hunter 54. She was already in Florida. When I bought Moxie, she was in St. Petersburg, Florida, and it was a quick move just a few days later by truck down to the boatyard in Port Charlotte. That was a much better way to buy a boat and start the refit. By buying a boat near where you're going to use it or refit it, you have a lot more control over everything. The fourth lesson I learned from the Tri is to have a survey done before you buy any used boat. I didn't have a survey done on the Trimaran, but I did fly out there and see it in person before I bought it. That was a wise decision. But with Moxie the 154, I wasn't able to go and view it. I actually bought Moxie sight unseen, but it made me a lot more comfortable by paying for what I had done was a partial survey. They weren't able to get it out on the water, but the surveyor was able to inspect the boat fairly thoroughly in the boatyard when it was up on the Hard in St. Petersburg. I felt much more comfortable purchasing the boat sight unseen, having a survey done before I bought it. The fifth and final major lesson I learned from owning that Trimaran and trying to do that refit is to only take on what you can handle. For almost a year and a half, I actually owned both boats, which were thousands of miles apart, one in Hawaii and one in Florida. I was actually trying to refit two 50-plus foot boats at the same time. That was a lot to handle. If your life is already very hectic and busy, I don't advise buying a used boat and trying to refit it. Make sure you know what you're getting into. Make sure you don't buy a boat that's too big for you to handle or is going to require extensive refit if you can't afford it or don't have the time for it. Projects on boats grow and grow. Projects pop up all the time and they grow into other projects. It's really a lot to handle. Now, luckily with Moxie, I'm able to handle the refit now that I don't own both boats at the same time. I'm also local. I actually lived on Moxie for a few months. Now I'm in an apartment and the marina's nearby, but I have a lot more control over the situation. I'm able to take on the projects myself or hire contractors as needed. I've had a far better experience with Moxie's refit than with the Trimaran. So those are the 5 major lessons I learned from trying to conduct that refit on that Tri in Hawaii. Number 1, make sure you take control or have control of the situation. Number 2, work with people you trust. Number 3, buy a boat that's close by, not on another continent and not thousands of miles away. Number 4, make sure you have a survey done before you buy any used boat. And number 5, only take on what you can handle. I took those big lessons to heart and I've had a far better experience with Moxie. You can learn from my mistakes. I really liked that Tri. I think it would have been an awesome boat to have in Florida. I even put a tribute to the Trimaran here with these 3 lines in the Sailing Moxie logo. But I owned it for several years and I was never able to get it to Florida, so it was just time to move on. And of course, you guys know I'm very happy with Moxie, my Hunter 54. She's an awesome boat. In other news, if you haven't noticed, I bought a kayak. I wanted something on the boat where I could just get out and do a little fishing, just explore the local area. So I went to Wally World and I bought the cheapest, smallest kayak that was able to hold my weight. I strapped it to the car, drove it to the marina, got it on the boat, and I was out on the water just a few minutes later. I also sold that Predator 3500 generator that I had on the boat. I had bought that when I was in Sarasota on the mooring ball. I needed power and that generator was absolutely excellent. I absolutely love that generator. It supplied tons of power. I was able to run AC, power tools, everything off of that thing. It was super quiet. I just absolutely loved it. But now that I'm on the dock and I have access to shore power, I decided to get rid of it, not because I didn't like it, but I wanted to free up some space. I definitely recommend that generator to anybody who has an RV or boat or needs additional power. Definitely recommend it. Well guys, thanks for watching all the videos. Thanks for the support. I really appreciate all the comments and advice you guys leave in the comments section below the videos. Thanks so much for doing all that. I really appreciate it. I love the responses and the questions that I get. Well, thanks guys. I'm going to get back to some fishing and we'll see you next time on Sailing Moxie. Thanks for watching.